Hi everyone, Lior here with another Jumpstart Lightning episode. We are continuing the series on AKS Edge Essentials. Today we talk about the JSON schema in Azure Arc. Play the music. Hi everyone, Lior here with another Jumpstart Lightning episode, continuing the conversation on AKS Edge Essentials. And Francisco, again, we are here to talk about all those good things. But before we dive in, as always, Francisco, who you are, what is it that you do?
Hi, Lior. Yeah, my name is Francisco Cabrera. I'm a technical program manager here at the Azure Light Edge team, working on really good products called, AKS Edge Essentials, but also working a lot in the kind of eFlow land.
So, Francisco, this is the fourth episode in this video series. We talked about the architecture of AKS Edge Essentials. Then we went a bit deeper into networking and storage. And thank you for the community. Those were super popular episodes, and just kind of showed the interest on understanding the architecture of this direction that we're taking. Francisco, before we are going into the demo, and today we're here to talk about the JSON schema and the relationship of AKS Edge Essentials with Azure Arc. The first thing that I wanted to ask you here, what was give me a bit of the history around the development of AKS Edge Essentials, and specifically the deployment experience.
Sure. So maybe before talking about AKS Edge Essentials, right, we need to talk about what eFlow is. So because AKS Edge Essentials was kind of built on top of eFlow. And eFlow it's a product that our team also created and is also managing. eFlow stands for IoT Edge for Linux on Windows, which is a way, right, to run IoT Edge, to run containers, right, on Linux containers on top of a Windows device. And when we were doing that, we had a kind of the deployment type was more like doing a bunch of PowerShell commandlets. For example, one for setting the networking, one for DNS, one for proxy. And we got a lot of feedback from our customers that they wanted to get this kind of one place or one JSON file where they would just declare all the configurations they wanted, all the networking, all the connections, right? And then just run a script and run and get a final result of some errors and some logging. So when we started with AKS Edge, we said, okay, let's go ahead and do that JSON as the default deployment way. Although we do have some kind of partial command instead that you can use, but the default is JSON.
Okay, so today we are, you gave a good history there and also a good segue to what we really want to talk about today, which is the JSON schema, and also going to talk about and touch on the Azure Arc related stuff. And as always, you always come with the demo to show me. And today, really, I want you to educate me and our viewers on the schema. Like how do you create this? What do you do with that? Why are we doing what we're doing here?
Yeah, sure. So maybe let me start by just showing, we're going to do a JSON file, but the first thing, is just going over our documentation. Everything, every kind of attribute of this JSON file is documented here. You have a description of what it is. You'll have, what's the default value, what are the options and everything. So, we'll share these links so that you can get the whole information.
Yeah.
So maybe the first thing that we're going to do is just by starting, this kind of template. So you can do like something like new AKS Edge config. And here you can just use the default template, or you can just create, right, like one specific for a specific kind of deployment. So we're going to go ahead and say, our type of cluster, deployment type, there we have it, right? So let's do a scalable cluster. We'll already talk about what a scalable cluster is, right? Using an external virtual switch where you can go ahead and join other machines to this cluster. And then we're going to say, let's say we're going to do both Linux and Windows kind of nodes. So there it is. There's created this file. So now let's go ahead and deep dive into what is this JSON file that was created. So I have it here. Let me open it here. Okay, so let's start first with the schema version. This is just internal for us. We're keeping this version, right, for us. We move into different kind of PowerShell modules across versions, right? We'll have different schema versions. The second here is have your version. So if you want to have, a unified kind of JSON and you just keep, iterating over that, this is going to be your internal version that you can use. Deployment type, we already talked about these two different kind of deployments. Could be scalable cluster where you can just add kind of different machines to one cluster, or it could be single machine cluster, right, where you just have one machine that can run now Windows and Linux Then we have here this init part where we talk about the service IPs. So if you're using scalable cluster, you need to set up what's the IP address of this service IP that will start. And then also you need to do the service IP range. So it could be, for example, this is 10. So if I was to go ahead and do something like, I'm going to use this network, the 0.20, that's where all my service IP are going to start. And then I'm going to just need to say, okay, I want to use 10 service IP, right? I want to reserve 10 IPs. Then it comes the Arc. This is told, right? This is optional. You're the Arc expert, so we'll go, and we'll come back again when we show kind of the Arc kind of connection. But going, a bit quick over here, cluster name, you can set up your own cluster. This is how it's going to show up, right, in the Azure Arc page. Let's put just something like, AKS EE test, something like this. Location, this is the Azure location of your Azure Arc. This could be, for example, I'm going to use East US. Resource group name here is what your Azure Arc resource group name. If you have one already created, you can use that one. If you want to create a new one, you just go ahead and you can set up what's your RG kind of name. So the Arc, let's say AKS EE RG. Subscription ID. This is your Azure subscription ID. You can get it from the portal or using the Azure CLI. Same for the tenant ID. And then here you have the client ID, right, which is the app ID of the service principal that you're using. And then finally, the client secret, right, which is kind of the secret for this specific kind of service principal.
And Francisco, before just kind of before you moving forward with this, I do have a question to ask you about Arc, and which I'm going to ask at the end around the experience here and the PowerShell versus the CLI. But the one thing that I will call out here is that I like the fact that we already have that embedded inside the JSON. Because if you take a step back for a second, like why this JSON is important, because like the way to deploy the cluster via the JSON method is basically do that in a declarative fashion. And as you think about automating this type of deployments, which is also something that, shameless plug, right? We're doing that as well as part of the Jumpstart scenario that we have for AKS Edge Essentials. And that's going to be the method moving forward. That's the only way to really deploy that cluster and being able to control those nerd knobs, how I like to call them. So I like the fact that we thought this through, and you guys thought this through around the Arc piece, which kind of makes an embedded experience because we are expecting for these clusters to be Arc enabled so you can enjoy all the benefits of our Azure Arc. But I know that we're going to talk more about Azure Arc later on.
Yeah, of course. And just why we want to have this experience also is we want to have this kind of unified deployment in a sense that when you're installing our AKS Edge MSI, you have all the components that are needed there, right? We know, we do have some also documentation around how you can use, for example, the Azure CLI in order to connect to Arc, right? But it's kind of another dependency that you need to install if you want to do that. So by we're providing this just one MSI that has all the components there, and that's why we're kind of going through the Arc and PowerShell approach, right?
Loving it. Yeah.
Okay, so now let's continue here. Now let's go over network. The first thing is the control plane endpoint IP. So this is going to be the IP address where your control plane is going to be receiving all these kind of communications from the different nodes.
Yeah.
So for example, let's go ahead and we're going to be using in my case 192.168.0, let's say 10. Then you have the network plugin. So if you're using KDS, we support Flannel. If you're using K3S, we support Calico. You can do it. You can try the other way around. It's just that like Flannel or K3S is experimental and Calico and KDS is experimental. Then write the IP gateway address. This is your gateway or your subnet. For example, in my case, it's going to be 192.168.0.1. Prefix length also will depend on your subnet. Right? Generally, it could be 24. But if you have a bigger or a larger subnet, you need to change that.
Yep.
DNS servers. So this is the DNS servers that you want to use inside the Linux node and the Windows node. If you don't set up this, what we're doing is we're grabbing the DNS servers that are already kind of set up on the Windows host OS, and we just use those.
Yeah.
Internet disabled. So as you know, right, when we're doing the deployment, we do a couple of internet checks to make sure that you're going to be able to connect them to Arc, or you're going to be able to connect to ACR. So if it's the case that you're doing a kind of totally offline deployment, you can go ahead and put here internet disable true, and we'll just ignore all those checks. Skip address free check. So we do, when you're assigning these IPs, right, and when you kind of reserve the service IP range, we also do some checks there to make sure that those service IP are available. So we use we use kind of Arc traffic there to make sure that we can use these IPs. But in some cases, we know that some networking environments, they block that kind of traffic, or they do have another IP assignment way, so you cannot kind of check that. So again, you can go ahead and skip that check if you want.
Yeah. And, Francisco, before you were moving with the other attributes that we have in the JSON, one thing to call out, as I've been playing with AKS Edge Essentials for a while now and starting to be more and more invested in this space. One of the things that I was super impressed about is the pre-checks. And I think I mentioned this in the previous episode or in the networking episode that we had, when we talked about, okay, what is happening when you're deploying the cluster and the nodes with the cluster, and the pre-check is really was done very nicely in the way that, one, I like the verbose style of those pre-checks and the fact that you're actually getting information that is, one, human readable, and two, valuable, because it helps you understand where you are failing in case the deployment is failing. And also, I truly appreciate a good user experience. To me, when I'm approaching a product and I'm thinking about, okay, how that experience should look like, I'm thinking about, the end user that just want something to work. So pre-checks are like super critical, and I'm super happy that the team included this the way, you guys did that.
Yeah, and again, this was all a lot of feedback that we got from customers, and I encourage the community, if they have any other kind of pre-check that they want us to add, just let us know through our GitHub.
100%.
So then we have proxy. So this is common kind of proxy variables. You have the HTTP proxy, the HTTPS proxy, and then finally the no proxy. So if you see here, the no proxy is all the traffic that you want to avoid the proxy settings. In our case, we have localhost, of course, and then it's all kind of the networking, the Kubernetes networking from the plugins, right, and the management there.
Yeah.
Then you have these are user things that we need to accept or not. So basically, they accept the EULA. This is mandatory, of course. And then you have the optional telemetry that you can opt in or opt out, right? If you opt out, then you will have just the required telemetry there.
Yeah.
And finally, we have the machines configuration. These are the nodes configuration. First of all, we did a scalable cluster, which means that we're having an external virtual switch. So if you see there, we have an adapter name. That's the name of the physical adapter that we'll be using in order to create this external virtual switch.
Yeah.
And then we have the MTU, right, which is a maximum transmission unit that we'll be using in this network that is connected these machines. Finally, we have the kind of nodes configuration. So first we have the Linux node, CPU count. That's the amount of virtual CPUs that are assigned to the VM. Then you have memory in B. So that's the RAM memory that's assigned to VM. One thing there is just this memory, right, is assigned statically. So that means that when we run the VM, those 4 GB, for example, here are going to be assigned to the VM and not shared with the Windows host runners, right?
Yeah.
And it's not like sometimes other Hyper-V where you can set up a dynamic memory where you set a minimum or a maximum. No, here it's just like static, and those 4 GB are going to be assigned. Data size in GB, so that's just for the storage. It's important here to notice that at least right now we do not support resizing that VHDX, which means that if you then want more storage, you'll have to redeploy the node. So I encourage users to make sure that they calculate how much they'll need before doing this deployment.
Yeah.
IP address, this is going to be the IP address of the Linux node. MAC address, this is optional. So if you want to have a static MAC address, you can do that. If not, we will just create a randomized MAC address and we'll keep it across the VM lifecycle.
And Francisco, one comment on the storage thing that you had, because we talked a lot about storage in the previous episode around the storage architecture. Here we're talking about the storage of the operating system for the node. We're not talking about potentially we are talking about the persistent storage if you're using the local provisioner, but in a production environment, most likely you're going to use either the NFS provisioner or the ones that we're still working on moving forward. So just again wanted to emphasize that point, but it's definitely important for you to understand the architecture and understand what are your requirements when it comes to the storage and making sure that the node is not failing because there's no more space for the operating system and all the binaries.
Yeah, great. Yeah, that's a great point, right? Other type of, in this storage, you have, for example, also the logs, right? The pods and all the Kubernetes kind of runtime there.
Yeah.
And the last one that we have here is just a timeout in seconds. So this is when we create the node, just both Linux and Windows, we need to initialize this kind of Kubernetes runtime. That can take some time. So depending on your memory, your CPU, and your networking, it can take from 1 minute all the way up to 15 minutes. So you can just work with, with this parameter and make sure that, it fits your own kind of environment.
Yeah. And obviously, Francisco, like you shared the document with all the attributes, we're going to share that in the description down below. There's a lot of attributes here, but I actually think it's great. That gives you the granularity that is required to deploy things to your own environment and making sure that you have everything that you need. Obviously, there's a lot of nerd knobs here, but there is a reason for that. So obviously, we're going to share all these attributes with our viewers.
Yeah, sure. And again, if the community thinks there's something else that was needed, we encourage people to go up to our GitHub and just propose new features and new parameters.
So Francisco, we talked about Arc. So we covered the JSON. There's a lot here, and I actually like it a lot. I like the declarativeness. I like the fact that we have all our bases covered here. Let's talk about Arc for a moment. The use case here is pretty straightforward. It's a Kubernetes cluster, so the natural thing for us to talk about is Arc-enabled Kubernetes. And you guys wrap the experience inside the deployment.
Correct. Yeah. We're trying to make it really simple, right? Just go ahead. You need to fill in these 7 parameters here, and you should be connected to Arc. It's really simple. So again, I already connected to Arc, but I'm going to show you how you can do that. So basically, you will have to fill in all these parameters, and then it should be really simple. So you just do connect, right? AKS Edge Arc, and then you just use the file, which is the same file as the deployment. Should be like something like this, and this will go over all the steps that are needed. Just download the dependencies needed, like in the PowerShell modules, and then just establish that connection.
And like you mentioned, this is part of the binary that you are starting with. When you're installing AKS Edge Essentials, you're using basically an MSI binary that includes all the PowerShell models that you need in order to do all the things that's got to do with either the deployment or like what you're showing me right now, which is the connect AKS Edge Arc PowerShell command. So all these models are included.
Correct. Yeah, and if there's any kind of module that we need, we'll download that, right? Or will be part of our instructions.
I love it.
So yeah, so once you get this command run, you'll get a lot of logs showing what's the status of that connection, and then you will get okay, connected. And the next step would be just going right to your portal, your Azure portal. I have it here. This is my portal. So if I go here, I do refresh. I already connected it. So if you can see here, my resource group is AKS EE Arc. My name, it was VBox. That's my name of my kind of machine, -test, right? Kubernetes version 124. Location is US. Subscription. So all these parameters were the one we talked before, right? And you can see it all here.
Yeah.
And if I go here, right, I can just go ahead and check all kind of my Kubernetes deployment directly from Azure. So I can go here, check the namespaces. They're having all active. I can go ahead and check the workloads also. So here we have all the workloads that are running. Services. You'll see all the services running in this Kubernetes cluster. And then finally, also, we can check storage. I created a local path storage, and you can see here the local path.
Really the experience that you would expect out of an Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes cluster, and just projecting that resource into ARM and into the portal. And Francisco, to wrap things up with this episode and just kind of maybe fine-tune the messaging here. We're deploying AKS Edge Essentials. That's magic number one. Magic number two is that now that you have the Arc, now that you have that cluster already deployed, you can Arc enable that cluster. That combination with a small footprint AKS flavor that we now have with Arc enabled Kubernetes basically give you, the breadth of options that you have with Arc enabled Kubernetes against an AKS Edge Essentials cluster.
Yeah, sure. And once you have Arc connected, like you can start doing a lot of more things, right? You can Flux, right? GitOps, you can do like other services, all right, are connected. So a lot of possibilities there.
Yeah. Well, Francisco, fourth episode in this series, and I continue to learn more and more about the history, about the spirit of AKS Edge Essentials. I'm really digging it. Thank you so much, Francisco, for joining me for yet another great episode in this series. And for the Jumpstart audience, make sure to like, subscribe, because why not? And Francisco, again, thank you so much for joining me for yet another episode.
Thank you, Lior.
And we're going to see you next time.